Can you guys all hear me? Okay, loud and clear. So I want to introduce the three of us. My name's Atanu. In the middle here we have Bulent, and this is Ari. You can think of us as the good, the bad, and the ugly. We had some disagreement on who was who, but we're still trying to work that one out. We're on a team at Microsoft called the Information Hygiene Team, and that handles things like anti-spam, anti-malware, anti-phishing, and we're going to talk about some of those technologies. So the service that we offer through Office 365 is called Exchange Online Protection. It's what we ship. It's a very heavily used service. We protect billions of emails every day. I know we're not talking about it in this session, but the same technology also protects the consumer version of email. So if you are familiar with hotmail.com or outlook.com, the same anti-spam, anti-malware technology also protects that system as well. Now, the work that we do is always changing. It's adversarial in nature. Spam is continuously evolving. The threats are always changing. And so the systems are also changing and adapting. And so what we're going to talk about in this session is some of the newer features that were landed. So you probably all heard about the advanced threat protection. And also for the other kinds of protection that we have, how those are changing over the course of the last few months and based on the kinds of threats that we're seeing. So the way we've structured this presentation is we're going to talk to you about the threats first, and we're going to walk you through some examples. And then we're going to map that to solutions, and Ari's going to talk to that. And then finally, Bulent's going to introduce you to some of the newer advanced threat protection features that we've been announcing. And we'll do some demos and deep dives. So let's talk really quickly about the kinds of campaigns that we see. So you must be familiar with spam because you're all sitting in this session. And so you know that it's typically mail that's not solicited. It's undesirable in content. But what you might not know is that the guys who send it, the spammers themselves, they're really businessmen. So they're all hooked up to these affiliate networks. They get paid for their conversion rates. They're very, very sensitive to the cost of their operations. So typically they'll rent out infrastructure from dodgy colos around the world. They'll rent out IP space. Or they might actually just contract out to botnets. And so any protection that we need to put in place needs to account for those different kinds of vectors. Because what we've seen is that anything that targets the contents of a mail generally isn't very effective. What we need to do is we need to focus on the infrastructure, the more durable investments that a spammer has made in order to be effective. So spam itself covers a lot of different kinds of mail. But when we talk about spam, we don't think of the mail as I just showed it to you. We think of it more in terms of these patterns in the data that we collect. So the same mail that I showed in the previous slide, that chart there, that represents the campaign that delivered that mail to us. So it lasted for a couple of hours. We got millions of mails that looked exactly like that. And that represented an investment on the part of the spammer. So he invested in IP space. He invested in bandwidth, network, all of that. And that was his payload. And so we actually blocked most of it. And so we consider that a success because the spammer would have lost money on that campaign because he sent us millions and we blocked millions. Now, and so that's why the defenses that we put into place, they just focus a lot on the economics of these campaigns. But for us to show that chart means we have some way to extract signals from the data. There's billions of emails, so there's a lot of noise in the system. So for us to extract that signal out of that data stream, in the past we used to use content filters, and we used to look for spammy words. But that's not very effective because content keeps changing. Spammers use hash busters. And so now what we're doing is, in addition to the content, we're also looking at signals that are based more on the connection information. So what IP space is he coming out of? What domains are being used? When were those domains registered? Are they new? Things like that spammers would find hard to spoof. And we also generate fingerprints by using hashing algorithms and fuzzy match technologies And so we can look at these fingerprints and out of all the data, identify discrete campaigns that are hitting us. And then we can also label those campaigns. Are these spam? Are they malware? Are they phish? Things like that. So that's spam. Let's talk about the next category. And this is a very sensitive one. So this is the bulk mail or newsletter category. And in many ways, bulk is similar to spam. It's also promotional in nature. But the thing that usually distinguishes bulk from spam is that we know who the sender is. That sender will be somebody that we will have reputation for. And there's a lot of different senders around the world. So we have this really huge list of who's sending us mail. And the reputation of those senders can vary from mostly good. So these are the senders that you guys will all be familiar with, like the Amazons of the world or the Travelocities of the world. Every now and then they'll send you some promotional mail. And on the other end are really bad senders that nobody really wants their mail from. And so typically for the farmer, the good senders, they'll have unsubscribe links. They'll be typically you will have had to have subscribed to those mails. And if you haven't subscribed, you wouldn't get them. And on the other end, the dark gray, they may not have those links, and you may not have unsubscribed. You may not have subscribed to them in the first place. So that's how we think about bulk. But what makes it challenging for us personally then is how do we protect against that? Because some users want bulk mail in their inbox, and other users don't. So when we block this stuff, then we get complaints. We have a feedback loop from users, and so people are saying, well, why are you junking this mail? I want this in my inbox. And if we don't block the mail, then we get complaints that you're doing the wrong thing. So what we try to do, and this is where the sender reputation comes in, is we try to look at the ratio of the complaints in both directions. And for senders that typically users want to see in the inbox, they get a higher reputation score. And senders who generate more complaints than requests to be inboxed, they get a lower reputation score. So that's how we keep tweaking the scores. So the next category I'm going to talk about is phishing mail. And again, this is something that's received a lot of press in recent times. So phishing mail is typically it's mail that is used to steal users' credentials or personal information. But phishing is also evolving. So in the past, it used to be very targeted towards individuals, and it would be to take financial information. But more and more, we're seeing attacks where the target isn't the individual anymore; it's the organization. And so, what that phish mail is, it's an attempt to secure a beachhead. So, what the attacker is trying to do is he's trying to make a slow and stealthy way through the organization. Compromise one machine and then use that as the basis for the following attack. And so that's his beachhead. And so that's how phishing mails are evolving. So we'll show you some examples of that and what we do to block these. Now, there's no real good solution to stop phish. The way we're breaking it down is that we're trying to improve filtering, so that's the one thing. We're trying to advocate for a better user experience or user education. And so much of that is on you guys, but we're also looking at ways to improve the experience in the clients to make it more obvious when a mail is suspicious. And then the third is for phishing mail that goes through the system, because we can't detect it in time, we want to have a set of capabilities that will still protect the user. And that's going to be the focus of Bulent's last part of this presentation, the advanced threat protection. So now let's talk about malware, which is the last category. So we talked about spam, we talked about bulk, we talked about phish, and now this is malware. So malware it's malicious code that gets to a user's mailbox, or is an attempt to get to a user's mailbox, and it might be keyloggers, or it might be banking trojans, things like that. Some of the newer techniques that are being used are these things that scrape RAM. So it's looking for things like credit card numbers that are sitting in the RAM of the user's machine. And the payload that is delivered in these kinds of attacks could either be as an attachment or as a URL. It could be a Word document or something with a macro. There's a lot of these different ways to deliver this payload. And it's very hard to protect against, because in the past, we would treat these as similar to AV. So we'd use AV engines, we'd be looking for signatures. But malware campaigns are evolving. A lot of these signatures are distributed in nature. So the attackers are also aware of these signature-based protection mechanisms. And so they're constantly tweaking the payload so that the signatures morph as well during the campaign. And so what we need to do is the protection that we put into place and that Bulent's going to go over is going to have a combination of not just AV and scanning, but also a set of other capabilities that provide a more comprehensive set of protection. So we talked about the taxonomy of these different kinds of campaigns. And in terms of numbers, so we thought we'd share, kind of what kind of attacks we typically see. And so the billions of mails that we get every day, maybe about 60% of it gets, so 61% of it gets delivered to the inbox, and about 36% of it gets blocked at the edge. So this is mail that we're just saying we don't even let into the Office 365 network because right at the edge of the network we can detect that this is bad stuff. And then a very small fraction of it, 4% of it, actually gets into the filters that we run inside of our system, and then that either results in an AV, basically a malware detection, or it lands up in the junk mailbox. And of that 4% that's junked or gets stopped by the malware scanning engines, most of that mail is actually just bulk mail. So it's gray mail, it's marketing mail, the category that's really hard for us to decide whether it's good or bad. And then about 10% is just spam. And then a really small percent, it's just 1% or 1.3% is phish or malware. So as a fraction of our overall mail, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. It's really that small. But in terms of impact, that's the thing. Those kinds of mails are the one that that hurt customers the most because they represent the threat of a compromise. And so if we start looking at what customers are experiencing, so we did that exercise as well. We looked at a group of different customers, and we saw that the threat or risk profiles for those customers are quite different. So some customers, customer X in the chart here, is getting a lot of bulk mail, and that's very standard for some of the enterprise customers. They don't get a lot of phish or malware, or we block it, so they're not seeing it. And they're not getting much spam either. It's just newsletters that people have subscribed to. However, there are some of our customers, the ones that are on the extreme left that have the spikes and the phish and malware. Those are typically educational institutes. So if you're an EDU, you know that your students are very lax with what they subscribe for, what they're doing with their mail. And so they're the ones who see a lot of these really nasty kinds of mail. So that was pretty generic. So, but there's a set of things that we're seeing that make these threats a lot more dangerous than just what I described. So first of all, users are usually unaware that they're under attack, even when it's happening. So this is a campaign that hit us. It hit us last Thanksgiving, and it ran for a couple of months. We call it the MyFax campaign internally. It represented as a fax malware. So you got a mail saying you've received a fax, and you click on it, and you get to see the contents of the fax. Now, what we've seen is about 45% of the users can't tell the difference between a real mail and a phishing mail. So if you look at this, you might think that, yeah, I wouldn't click on the link. And certainly I would think that, but 45% of people would actually go ahead and click on that link. And what those links are is the links are connect to hijacked websites, usually like WordPress sites or blog sites or just websites that have been compromised. And these compromised servers are available on the internet. They keep getting recycled. If you look at the websites themselves, they're very normal looking. So this was a personal blog of some girl in Romania that was compromised. This one is a wedding site in Europe. And this is a small business consulting site in the US. There's nothing obvious that connects them, except that all three of these websites were compromised and were hosting phishing URLs that pointed back to us. And if you clicked on that link, you would download malware that would basically install a keylogger on your machine, and then phone home, and then it would start sending banking credentials. So this is one of the campaigns that we saw. And again, it seems innocuous, but it does get a lot of victims. Now, the second thing that makes some of these threats dangerous is the targeted nature of these attacks. So this is another mail that hit one of our customers. And it was a spear phishing mail. So it was targeted to the CEO, to the CFO, and it represented as coming from the CEO. It spoofed the sender address. So you can see that I've changed the identities, but in this case, if you think of the company as Fabricam, it added an extra letter to the end of the sender mail. And then they used a variety of techniques like social engineering for the most part, but here it's addressed to the CFO from the CEO asking for a financial cash transaction. And this is what we call whaling because it's a high-value target. And we see a few of these every now and then. Now, the last thing that makes this a little complicated is that sometimes when we stop these attacks, and we usually stop all of them, is that the damage that happens, this collateral damage. So this is a mail that we saw that represented itself as coming from a government. I won't say which government, but it represented as a parking ticket. So you clicked on the link to see what your parking ticket invoice was, and then that downloaded malware. So it was a global malware mail. It hit email addresses all around the world over a span of about a week. And we actually blocked pretty much all of it. But when we blocked that campaign, what we saw is that, and we didn't realize at the time what we were doing, but we were generating a bunch of NDRs. And these NDRs were going back to the government agency that this campaign was spoofing. And so they suddenly got a flood of NDRs, and that basically DOSed their servers. And so that was painful for them. It was painful for us. It was maybe it's good marketing material for us to say move to the cloud because for us the campaign wasn't that big. It really honestly wasn't. It was maybe 10 to 20 million mails over a span of a few hours. And our system can handle that, but there's not a lot of mail servers out there that can handle that sudden load. So this is just something that we are now a lot more aware of. And when Ori is going to show some of the protection systems we have in place, so we now look for things like this. So that's the set of threats that we're facing and the attacks that are changing. What do we do about that? What are the systems that we put in place? So we have a set of automated protection. So these are engines that we write and we continue to evolve. Some of these are our own. Some of these are third-party. And then we have a team of analysts that analyzes evolving and emerging threats and comes up with zero-day responses, things like that. And then we use a lot of data that we get from third-party feeds. So these are companies that have networks of honeypots that go across a bunch of different services, not just us, but also Google and Yahoo and AOL. And so they have a more broader picture than us. So we know what's going on inside our service, but they see what's going across a bunch of different services. So they're kind of like best-of-breed providers. And they also give us reputation feeds. Now, the system that uses this looks like this. I'm not going to walk you through the blocks. Ori's going to do that. And he's going to do that in the context of a particular campaign. So he's going to talk about one of the campaigns that we saw. And then he's going to show how each of these different blocks works to protect users from that campaign. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Ori, and he's going to show you that next section.
Great. Thanks, Atanu. So hopefully everyone's sufficiently frightened now of everything out there. Just terrified. If you're not, Atanu will happily take a picture making his scariest face and send that to all your users with an educational newsletter. It'll be really effective, I promise you. So we're going to start in on anatomy of campaign, and we're going to relate that into how the service is actually going to protect at multiple levels in order to provide defense in depth as to how we stop each piece of it. Let me get the clicker. There we go. So this is what a typical phishing campaign looks like. So the mails come from a well-known financial institution. We picked PayPal. It's very common that people try to spoof that and attack different users to get their financial information, their account information. Different banks, eBay, Apple, Google, Microsoft, everybody is a potential target for spammers and phishers to use as kind of a way to prop up their reputation when they're trying to infiltrate an organization. And there's a big psychological and social engineering component here. It can't be overstated that the number one mode of prevention, besides all the technical solutions I'm going to present to you, is education of your users. So the better educated your user base is, and the more you can reinforce the importance of understanding that phishing attacks happen and to really understand what's going on. And we help where we can. As Atanu mentioned, we're enhancing the user experience more and more to put it in their face, really, to see this is a suspicious mail. That is the most effective way to prevent compromises, malware, botnet infections from happening. Okay, the graph on the right, that's actually just kind of a typical pattern of what you'd see in a phishing mail. As it gets more evident that it's a phish, you see these waves of attacks are occurring. They dissipate on their own, obviously, because the campaign really gets the most value in the initial stages, and our protection and our customers' protection clamps down on it, because we do get more submissions and we do get feedback saying, yeah, this piece of mail that it looks kind of legitimate was actually reported over and over again as a phishing mail, as a spam mail. And so that reinforces our protection. Can you hit that? Yeah, it wasn't working. Okay, so let's start with edge protection, and we'll see where that block lands on the diagram in a second. But what we're trying to do there is, who is the sender? Who is sending me this mail, and what can I do to decide, should I even start a session with them? Should I reject them at the edge? Or should I let them actually get into our service and spend the cycles on actually further picking apart the mail? So this is leading into the discussion of why are they spoofing? Because spoofing, as I said before, is the best way to gain the trust of the users. If they impersonate a trusted organization like Google, like Microsoft, like Apple, like any of their banks, then it's going to instantly, the user say, oh yeah, I kind of recognize that. I'll go ahead and read the mail, I'll go ahead and do something. So we try to take steps just as early as possible in the cycle not to put that mail in front of the users, to not expose them to that threat. So you'll see here there's the from address, the 5322.from. The visible from is actually showing up as paypal.com. There we go. So the problem, we can't trust the sender to correctly identify themselves. Multi-layered edge protection is what we use to prevent that from happening as much as possible. Now, that block there, that edge protection, is going to be based on IP, domain. These are block lists that we've invested in both with our own technology and our own data, as well as using third-party feeds, as well as using feedback loop from our users in order to really find the worst of the worst that we know we shouldn't even take a chance on any kind of traffic from them. And so we don't let them into our mail system at all. We just reject them at the edge. We'll give them an SMTP response saying they've been blocked. We publish the codes so that if a legitimate sender ever gets trapped up in that, they'll know that that's something that they need to come talk to us and get delisted, because they won't have an opportunity to send to any O365 property. Okay. So that address can be spoofed. IPs can have decent reputation or no reputation, so they're not on that edge block list. So what else can you do? You can have an SPF check in place. And this is one of the options that many of you may be familiar with. If you go into the Exchange Admin Center to the advanced spam filtering rule, you can actually hard fail an SPF if you want to go that far. And this is an industry-wide standard called Sender Policy Framework. And we'll go to the next. Thanks. That it's actually tying the outbound IP of the sender to the sending domain. And in that way, you can really scope down what IPs, if you are a sender, what IPs you would expect your mail to ever come out of. So if someone outside of your IP space ever tries to send as you, it'll fail SPF there. Okay. But sometimes it doesn't always work. So email forwarding, and you have sharing from certain sites and third party, I want this bulk provider to send a campaign on my behalf. These scenarios all break SPF because the IP that you're actually going to see that mail coming from isn't really necessarily part of your record. So you can take steps such as including these other properties, if you do trust them, such as a third-party bulk company that you've contracted with, and include them in your SPF record. But that's something that you're going to have to upkeep and verify and really walk through the scenario to make sure that the last hop, that last IP before it gets sent out, is matching with the contents of what you've published in that record. Okay. So potentially there are scenarios you can't avoid, or you didn't update your SPF record, and there is a failure. What then? So there's a new technology called DKIM, semi-new, domain key, there you go, identified mail. And what you're doing in that case, you're actually digitally signing the mail with a token and a timestamp and saying, yes, this is an added assurance that the person sending this mail is who they say they are. So in conjunction with SPF, these are primary modes of protecting your mail. And if you look at any of the email headers that are coming and circulating throughout EOP and through O365, you'll see we actually stamp the status of, did it pass SPF? Is there a DKIM signature that is valid right in the header so that you can action on that if you want to do it with exchange transport rules or use our protection settings that key off of it as well. Okay. So a spammer can authenticate using DKIM. It can happen. So they can do a lot of different things to make that happen, as far as hijacking the tokens, as far as finding, if you that SPF range to include third parties, they can potentially compromise a third party and then send from that space. Spammers and these people that start these different campaigns to try to hijack and spoof will come at us from every angle. I mean, we can attest to the fact that if there's vulnerability, spammers out there will be the first ones to find it. And we know that no service is impervious, but you can't ever be complacent in believing that, oh, this is a corner case. No one's ever going to find that. They're highly motivated. It means money in their pocket. They're going to find any vulnerability in your system, and they're going to come at you from whatever creative solution they can come up with. So they can find ways of impersonating you with DKIM or SPF. So we have the continuation of the evolution of these anti-spoofing standards, DKIM and SPF, and you have DMARC, which is something that we're rolling out right now. Actually, we're about fully rolled out with this in EOP for inbound. And what DMARC is, it's actually a combination of SPF and DKIM, and it's checking to see, did one of these pass? And if one of these didn't pass, why didn't it pass? And it's actually a reporting standard to give you feedback on if there was a failure for SPF or for your DKIM, why was there a failure there? So in that way, you can manage your brand, manage your reputation, and understand what's going on. And you can get feedback in that way. And we actually use internally a company called Agari. There's a lot of other companies out there that'll actually offer you services if you don't want to manage your own reporting feedback as far as your DMARC reports for status. And you really get a lot of good insight to see, did I set everything up correctly? Are there any issues? Am I getting failures all over the place? And looking at that data and analytics is the most helpful way to understand, hey, am I all good? Am I essentially secure in not getting spoofed by having a really strong identity when I'm acting as a sender? Okay. So before we move on, let me ask a question. How many people here have set up DKIM, SPF, and DMARC? Person. Actively. Right now. Right now. We got a lucky man in the back. Get a shirt. Way to go. Before I move on to the next section, I will say that we have steps published online. We have a lot of blog entries. I really encourage you to look at this and analyze how far away and what gaps do you have, what obstacles do you have in order from going from not secured to actually getting a secure brand identity that will prevent you from getting spoofed. It'll save you a lot of heartache in the future, and it'll definitely just enhance the security landscape for everybody using the service. So we're always actively trying to encourage people down that road as much as possible. We'll take questions at the end. Just hold on. So I'm just going to move on to the detection piece and go into a little more detail as far as, great, something passed our edge protection. So bypassed whatever rules we had based on IP, based on domain. We actually complete the session, take in the mail. We have a number of different mechanisms and agents that run then in the transport pipeline before it actually reaches the tenant. And so going through these, I'll stay on this one. We have reputation and spam detection engine, which I'll talk about next, an anti-malware AV engine, Boomerang, which is addressing the backscatter issue that Atanu mentioned before, and DKIM DMARC SPF is part of that mechanism, because if you don't have a rule set up on the edge, we can still use those failures to influence what's the reputation overall and maybe be a little more cautious with how we scan things. So let's talk about reputation first. What is reputation? Reputation is really establishing an identity for a sender based on a number of different mechanisms and data sources that we have. So we'll tie together maybe IP, domain, specific sender address, whatever we have, and actually cross-sections and intersections of all of those identifiers, and then say, what's their history? What have we seen from them? Good mail, bad mail, spam ratio, bulk ratio, phishing emails, volumes, typical behaviors, and we really get down to the nuts and bolts of, are they acting like they usually act? So once you've established a reputation with us, we say, great, we see that this is your pattern. Any deviations are going to raise a red flag in our system, and that's something that we're going to actively investigate and potentially take action on. So what if your customers get blocked? What if your partners get blocked and you do get listed? And this can happen in a number of ways. Maybe we'll list you on edge protection, maybe we'll throttle you, maybe we'll take action to protect the service and to protect our customers. But these are people that you actually want to receive mail from, or your partners or your customers want to receive mail from. So of course, the tenant will have control, and we'll talk about that in a second, to kind of allow the bypass of certain customers and certain senders to get through. But senders do have a delisting option to delist themselves, and we're going to be rolling out more and more sender support for the service. This is something that already exists in the consumer space, and enterprise is actively embracing it as well, to allow senders that typically maybe get caught in the net by accident, or they are bulk senders and get some complaints and some false positives, to take ownership and say, yep, I own these IP addresses, I own these domains. Alert me when you do something about this. Give me a pathway to manage my reputation and really communicate with MTAs such as Microsoft that have this huge breadth of incoming mail that we see from all the corners of the world. Okay. So IPv4, IPv6, why does it relate to this and why does it matter? So when I talk about reputation, I have to mention this, that reputation is probably the most critical piece to protection in an IPv6 world. IPv4, much simpler. We are able to rely a lot more on static lists, a lot more on tying down your IP as your identifier. We don't even have to worry about domains so much, because the IP limiting space and the expense of moving around all the time into multiple IPs was excessively discouraging for spammers. And this is something that some spammers get around by recycling IPs and building reputation and taking all sorts of techniques which we handle in different ways. But when you look at what's going to happen when we move into the IPv6 world, reputation is critical. There's going to be such a plethora of space, we can no longer rely on these static lists in order to address and identify who's communicating with our customers. And so, as I said, reputation, that's what we're going to use to really get data around entire ranges of IPs and cross that with the domain and cross that with whatever entity we can identify behind the domains. Okay. Moving on to Boomerang, which is another piece of detection. This is addressing the backscatter concern that we mentioned before. So just to go into a little more detail about backscatter, if I take not my mail from, but my actual reply to email, you're going to have the NDR generator go back. So I can spoof and say, hey, I'm PayPal, and I'm going to send you a mail, but my reply to can go to somewhere completely different, such as an EDU, such as a Microsoft tenant, such as a small company with vulnerable mail servers that can't handle that load, and then the mailstorm from us generating, or whoever received it generating that mass of DSNs and NDRs is going to cripple the recipient, or at the very least inconvenience them. So Boomerang is an enhancement that it's something that we've turned on for everyone as an option in the system. And if you go to the Exchange Admin Center today, you'll see that you have a backscatter protection option that you can turn on if it's not on already. And that'll take advantage of this. And it leads to a couple of things. One, it'll prevent as many false positives as previously experienced, because before it's hard to distinguish legitimate NDRs and these spoofed NDRs because of the characteristics. Now, in addition, there's identity and personalization aspect to Boomerang. So if any of you are familiar with BAT-V, which is one of the industry standards for how you're actually tagging for backscatter protection on an NDR, this goes beyond that. And it's actually taking into account mail patterns between mailboxes to understand, was there a conversation here? Is this typical? Should I be sending an NDR here, or should I be rejecting that? Okay. So it's made it through the content filter. But now I want some control as a customer of Microsoft and a customer of O365. Well, so you have the ETRs we mentioned before. You have the configuration that the admin is going to do for the tenant with their block allow. And you actually have each user is composing their own allow list for mail that they say, oh yeah, no, this is gray mail, bulk mail, but I still want to receive it. Even if the reputation degrades, even if something happens, always let it through. Or the other way around. We may think this newsletter, hey, most financial institutions love this newsletter. I'm in the pharmaceutical industry. I want nothing to do with a prospectus about, what trends are happening in that space. So I'll choose to block that as a user. And these settings actually get aggregated up and will supersede some of the content filtering agents, but will not supersede edge protection. So if the reputation is so bad that we're actually rejecting them on the edge, that'll always occur. But you can use these tools to really tune the system so that you're getting the mail that you want and rejecting the mail that you don't want over what our reputation system and our content filter agents think. This will also not supersede anti-malware, however, which is important to note. Now, what do we do if mail gets caught? So if it's really terrible, as I said, or if you're a repeat offender, IP domain block list, and that's going to be a feedback loop back to the edge protection first yellow block that we discussed. Now, if it's something where we don't know, we're not sure just yet because we don't have enough data, we don't want to take too harsh an action because our primary concern is not to interrupt legitimate mail flow for our customers. And so in that case, we'll simply the mail, we'll give a 451 response, throttle that sender, and say, we're going to take time to run this through additional steps, gather additional data, get more third-party data additionally, and then we'll accept the mail or reject it at the end of that period. And the final option is actually something that we provide customers to turn on themselves if they choose to use it, and that is spam quarantine. And for those of you that are familiar with it, this is a feature set around actually putting the mail to the side and either getting the end users themselves or just an admin to go ahead and say, yep, release this suspicious mail, or no, don't let this through. And there's a number of tools there to help you understand what that message was, why it was stopped, and what you're potentially releasing when you're performing that action. Okay. So this block here, the analyst engineering support, comprised the human element that Atanu mentioned as far as what we have in place to protect the system. And they use this middle tier of automation and response tools to interact with our different agents, with the different data sources that we have. Again, we try as minimally as possible across the board to actually touch any real customer data. But when we talk about aggregated non-PII data that we use for analytic purposes, or we talk about things like third-party lists or submissions that we are actually intended to look and pick apart, that's where the analysts come into place, and these are the tools that they're using. And additionally, at the bottom, We have a bunch of feedback loops and data sources that I've referred to a couple times already. So we have the junk mail reporting tool that hopefully all of you have your end users using, providing us submissions. That is the best way to get us to take action on mail that you perceive as malicious that you don't see us catching, or the other way around, something that we're too aggressively blocking. As well, we have subscriptions to numerous third-party data sources, and we use internal data to always continuously improve our machine learning reputation system. Okay. I'm going to briefly go over outbound protection as well, so that we have enough time with advanced threat protection. So it looks very similar. Can't really tell, just from a glance how different it is. But there's a different set of scenarios here because outbound protection is really about jeopardizing the service as a whole. So it's what the world perceives of any tenant and any customer behind O365 and behind EOP. And that reputation is key in order to maintain this uninterrupted mail flow to whoever your recipients are. Okay. So again, in this case, the sender is going to be from within our service, and it could be on-prem, it could be hosted. First piece that we're going to hit is detection. And that's going to be, again, reputation, content filtering, all that good stuff. Anti-malware component, exactly the same. And tenant and mailbox specific detection if you are sending it to somebody else who's also within our service. Now, when I talk about reputation, I just want to be really clear here. The reputation of a sender within our service and the service itself are two different ideas. So you talk about tenant reputation, you say, yeah, do you usually send a ton of good mail, a ton of bad mail? What are your volumes? What are your behavioral patterns? The service itself also has those same attributes, but on a much larger scale. And we are constantly being analyzed by all sorts of third-party reputation systems and providers across the globe. And it's something that we actively have to manage, to be in touch with them, to have that good relationship, and to ensure that if there's any kind of degradation, if they're seeing some sort of bad mail coming out of our service, then we're proactive about making sure that there's not going to be any kind of action on their part. Now, a response there, if you're one of our customers trying to send out a service, we can block domains and IPs, connectors, things like that. Those are really extreme cases. I don't want to scare anybody by mentioning this level of protection, but it is an option that we have. You will see a lot of these types of cases if you manage to configure your architecture in such a way that you are allowing an open relay. And so you get a ton of mail coming through from people that have nothing to do with your tenant, going through maybe one server that was compromised, and then they changed the configuration on that. So we're going to have to take action on IP there, specifically that we're spewing all that mail. And then obviously at the same time, we're proactively reaching out, trying to get in touch with the admin contact, which, again, I'm going to put an aside. If you haven't recently updated your admin contact, or please ensure that it's as current as possible, because that's our best channel to get to you as quickly as possible. Also, we may ban a specific sender. This is much more common. Single account compromise, single account mistakenly sent out way too much mail or malicious-looking mail. There's a lot of options there to contact us, and we're constantly trying to put the power in the admin's hands to resolve these kinds of single account issues. And finally, recipient rate limiting, which has to do with the amount of mail that you're allowed to send per day. We have all those limits on site, and I can talk to you guys after the session if you're interested in that. Okay. Service protection on our side. This is just about queue monitoring and throttling. Again, you can get into this with me in the Q&A or afterwards, but this is really about protecting service integrity and ensuring that good mail has highest priority and lowest latency getting out of our service. Outbound IP partitioning, I'll talk about briefly. So just when I mentioned that reputation that we have to monitor service-wide, one of the biggest benefits that we have is being able to actually slice and dice the mail based on our classification to decide which IP ranges it's coming out of. And we publish our full IP ranges, but we have internally mechanisms to actually designate which set of pools it's going to go out to, so that if there is mail that's suspect, it's not going to be coming out of the same neighborhood as good mail. So if ever there is, forbid an action that's taken against Microsoft's IP space, it's not going to impact the good mail that's going out of a completely different range. Okay. So the admin management tools are the Exchange Admin Center that you have. That's constantly going to get improvement. We're investing in that heavily right now. We're looking to empower the admin as much as possible to really manage and understand the outbound story, handle compromise recovery, things along those lines. The analysts are then outbound as well. This is something when we'll actually get feedback from third parties saying, you guys let mail through, you potentially have a compromise. We'll get alerts on data that will let us know that a campaign's kind of growing within our own system. And they do that through a number of different tools that we provide them internally and that we will provide to the admin as well in the form of analytics and such. And finally, there's same kind of data sources that we have for inbound, we also have for outbound. We do have partner reporting. There's something called SEWR, which is actually a pipeline of anti-spam reporting for third parties and partners of ours, such as Yahoo, AOL, Outlook.com has a channel to us, obviously, as well. For any mail that actually slips through or they get complaints about, we hear about them as well. And we're constantly expanding that partnership pipeline as well. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Bulent to talk about AT.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. So as you guys see, we are investing a lot in information hygiene. And as a Microsoft, we announced a lot of things this week. Windows 10 is coming up with this malware protection built into the operating system now. Azure is coming up with advanced threat telemetry and all that. And in Office 365, our solution to changing and evolving threat space is advanced threat protection. So the way that it's changing for us is the behavior of how the malware is distributed. When we analyze our traffic with all the good stuff that Atanu and Ori were already talking about, we are seeing adversaries they are still extremely dedicated, very committed, coming up with new malware solutions. They are also very creative with the way that they distribute the malware, especially through email. So we see a lot of short span attacks because they know that pretty much every solution out there uses signature-based AV solutions. And it takes a while to create the signatures. To give some insider data here, when we got the flash card from FPI for Sony, even for us, we have an AV engine internally owned by Microsoft. It took us around 20 to 30 minutes to come up with a signature and protect all our entities. So they know about this. So the moment that they come up with the attack, they pump as much as possible, and then they naturally stop because they know that there is no return of investment anymore. And we also see serial variant attacks. Basically, they build up a couple of variants of the malware, and then they start the attack. It's a short span attack, and then while people are working on addressing that, then they go ahead and launch the next one and the next one so that they make the most damage possible. So the problem with advanced threats in this kind of attacks is the knowledge that we need to have and how fast we can have it. And on the URL side, for malicious URL, which is the second part of the vector in email, is we can detect the health of the URL at the time of the email delivery, but these very sophisticated adversaries, what they can do basically is that they send all these phishing emails, that some of which we showed, and at the time of they sent the email, the URL is in the email is not malicious yet. So it can easily go through all the filtering mechanisms because they want to do the damage at the time of click. So the protection for URLs needs to be when actually the recipient of the email ends up using that URL. So how we are addressing this problem? Again, for attachments, we are coming up with safe attachments. And it's all about knowledge. So how do we know an attachment is safe or not? So we are extending our already multi-layered malware solution, signature and heuristic-based, with behavioral analysis, sandbox or detonation chamber. And on the URL side, as I said, it's the timing of the checking the health of the URL. And what we are doing is, instead of not only checking the health of the URL at the time of email delivery, but also at the time of click. And the solution that we are coming up with is not just a sandbox solution that you can put in front of O365 or use another cloud solution that provides similar protection. We are actually building this solution into O365 protection system that these guys have been talking about, and we are building it into our DNA and service fabric that it works in harmony and efficiently with the other protection systems that we have. Like any other feature that we have, it will have reach reporting, tracing, and other things that we provide with O365 by default. So those are the advantages that we are bringing in. I'll spend just a minute here on the service architecture. Ori already went into the Office 365 cloud that I put there. So how does ATP work? ATP comes into the picture after all the good stuff that these guys have been talking about. So EOP scans the email for all the protection mechanisms that we have. And then if it is an ATP recipient, which we are directing the email, and if there is the policy, then we will be sidelining the email for detonation chamber. If there is an attachment, there is a policy for the recipient, and the file types in the attachment are the ones that we support, and we will detonate. And if it has a URL, and it's already cleared by EOP, we will rewrite the URL no matter what, unless it's in the allowed list, which I will be showing you guys. So again, the detonation chamber that we are using here, it comes in the end. It's built in by Microsoft. It's taking advantage of Windows vulnerability detection, extending it with perimeter checks, which is more related to the content, and basically doing pretty much the same thing that end user will be doing with the attachment. And we do it in a sophisticated environment, in a clean VM, and we can detect if there is anything malicious happening, any vulnerability triggered, anything that's not supposed to be happening, but it's happening, and then we can tell that it's malicious. So it gives us the knowledge at real time while we are filtering the email. And on the SafeLink side, as I said, we do the URL check at the time of click. So at the time of click, we have the latest URL health checks available at the back end. And at the time of user clicks the URL, we are able to tell if that URL is malicious or not. So if at the time of email, if the URL was good and it just went bad, we will be able to detect that. If the URL goes bad again in 6 months and you happen to be clicking that again, we will be able to protect against. Another advantage that SafeLinks has is basically we are introducing URL tracing, which is, if you guys are familiar with EOP, we have message tracing, which is enhanced for SafeLink attachments. And with SafeLinks, we are introducing click tracing. Basically, for any recipient with ATP, you will be able to see which URLs they are clicking and what happened. And I will be showing that right now. So I'm going to start as being the bad guy. While I was listening to these guys, I prepared 2 emails. And one is for John. And John is a SafeLinks user. So I didn't craft it in a way that he will fall into my trap. So we have this, which is basically a bad URL. And we have good URLs here. So I'll go ahead and send this. And for Andy, who likes to work offline, I have a Word document here. It actually is a sample test file for us, and it actually does bad things. So the macros and such things are disabled on my machine right now. But for Andy, we will see what happens. So I'm just going to go ahead and send this as well. And let me quickly move to John. and see the user experience for safe links. Let's go to John's mailbox. And here you go. He already got the email. And I'm just going to go ahead and, interesting link, I will click on it. And just what happened right now is that, actually, if I just go back real quick here and hover over it, if you guys look at the side of the screen, you will see that we have rewritten the URL. Even though for the user it looks like the original URL, underneath it's pointing to safelinks.protection.outlook.com, which is a proxy on in our data centers. And at the time of click, it will be redirected, and we will be in real time checking the health of the URL, and we will be saying that, hey, this is a bad website, and then we will be blocking the user. So for the other ones, we can also do hyperlink, which is pointing to the same one. Again, no change from the user perspective, but he will be protected. I have this Azure here, which is a good website, and the experience for the user is completely seamless because there is no delay, pretty much no delay introduced here, so he won't even notice that he's going to O365 first and then redirect it to the good website. So this is how SafeLinks works. So now I'm going to switch to admin and talk about the admin and IT admin and security admin experience. Logging in real quick. Let's go back to admin page. So as I mentioned, both safe links and safe attachments are based on the policy concept that we have. So basically, the admin has tools to create policies. And in this case, we are looking at John, which I just showed. And we have a couple of options here. Basically, we start with off. And once you turn it on, we will be rewriting the URLs for this set of recipients. And we are doing URL tracing, but in some countries that might be a privacy compliance problem, so there is an option to turn it off. And there is also an option here that even though we detect that it's a malicious URL, you can still let your user to pick and proceed with the website, like here. It's not recommended, but if there is some reason that they need to have this capability, it's part of the policy that they have. And we also have the do not rewrite list. So basically, for your organization, internal sites and such, you can add your websites here, and then we will not be rewriting. In this case, if we go and look at his email back again, we will see that Bing.com is not rewritten. And the last thing that I want to show here real quick is that we know that ATP is not something that fits all in an organization. So it can be scoped at the level of users, domain, and the whole organization. So different departments might have different ATP policies, and it can be configured all this way. So let me show, while I'm showing safe links, let me go to the URL trace and see if we have the trace data for John already. So URL trace works very similar to message trace. We have the real-time data up to 7 days, and there is also a custom setting available. You can go all the way back to 90 days and then see the URL clicking in your organization. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick the default one here. And here we have the John's experience already with safe links. And the time of the click is logged. The recipient is there. Which URL that he was trying to go, did we block it or it was allowed? And if click-through was enabled, did he actually proceed and went to the malicious website that we marked. So another powerful feature here is actually we are linking URL trace with the email data that URL was delivered to your organization or recipient, because it's not only enough for us to know which recipient clicked what, but also know which email it came through. So we have all the details here in terms of message ID, recipients, and you can go ahead and see who other recipients already got this email. They may not have clicked the URL yet, so you can proactively go and warn them or take the appropriate action so that they don't proceed with the delivered email in case of a false positive or such. So this is all for message tracing, URL tracing and the safe links. And now that I'm in admin page, I want to show you guys the safe attachments. Safe attachments is also built on the same policy experience. And Andy was our guy here. And the options here are a little bit different. So with attachments, we are giving not only block, but also this replace. So in block case, if the malicious content is detected by the sandbox that it went through, we will be blocking the entire email and deleting that. In the replace case, we will be replacing the malicious attachment with a warning file, with a text file, basically saying that it was a PDF, but it was malicious, and we replaced it with this text file. So there is also a monitor. It's like the what-if mode for other policies. Basically, we do everything in terms of detection, but we take no action on your email, even if it is. There is also a redirect. We don't have a quarantine coming with ATP. So in case malicious or not, you want to see the content, we give you an option to a dedicated mailbox. We will be redirecting the entire email. And then you guys test or have a verdict and even recover the content if you want to. So it's also applied to, very similar to safe links at the recipient domain and the entire organization layer. With safe attachments, we are also introducing 2 new reports. And one of them is by disposition. So safe attachments are supported with Office file types, PDF, executables, Flash, and Java type of files. So we will be showing a report with file types that for your organization, for ATP, what are the main types that we find malicious? So we think that that's going to be very useful. And the disposition is basically based on the actions that you picked for each recipient or the scope down policy. We will be showing what's blocked and redirected, what's allowed, what's monitored, and such. So the last thing that I want to show here before I show the mailbox is message trace. Again, message trace is available for 7 days in real time, and it's enhanced with ATP features. So in this case, I'm just going to pick Andy. And then do a quick search. And here is the emails that basically saying failed, which means that we didn't deliver to him because it was blocked by advanced threat protection and redirected per his policy. So here we show the file name, type, environment. So we support different versions of Windows environment, and each file type, we run it on different OS and applications, actually. Like for a Word, we will be running it on Windows 8, Windows 8.1, and Office 2007, 2010, and 2013. So, and we will have the evidence here as well, basically saying that why do we think that it's malicious, because there is no signature. So we need to have some kind of evidence, such as trying to install an application, a memory expansion, or change in registry, and it will be all available as part of the message trace. So the last thing I'm going to show here is actually the admin mailbox, because I was redirecting the emails into his mailbox. And here is the email that was actually targeting Andy, but it was blocked by ATP and redirected to the admin in this case. So admin has the entire email. It was sent to Andy and Bulent in his organization. It was blocked for Andy, and entire file is also available here in case he wants to test it out himself. And in the notification email, we have the from to whoever in his organization is sent. In this case, if Bulent is not one of the ATP users, he will be actually, this attachment will be sitting in his mailbox. So it's a proactive action for the security admin to go notify him or remediate this somehow. So that's all I have for ATP. And I think we can move to Q&A now.
So we're going to grab a mic. Can you turn off your split? Okay. There you go. So open the floor. If you guys have any questions, feel free.
And before we start the question, I just wanted to call out, those are the additional information protection sessions for the remainder of this conference.
Okay.
Is there any way to get added to the early tap of ATP?
Yes. We launched it a couple of weeks ago. Right now we are in preview mode, and we are still accepting preview customers. So if let's sync up after this, and I will get you going on that.
Great. Feel free to step on the mic, yeah?
That was my question.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yes.
Two words, one, so go ahead.
I have a question. From some of my users, they try to release an email from quarantine. Sometimes it doesn't happen, and then I can't release it. Do you have a plan to allow administrators to re-release emails?
So you're saying that, does the mail already show up as released, or?
Yeah, it'll say it released it, but it never shows up.
Have you looked at the message trace of that specific mail?
I have.
Okay.
And but in a longer question, I think it would be advantageous if I could re-release that email.
Sure. I mean, that's something that we can look into. I mean, you can always through PowerShell rerun the commandlet for release quarantine mail.
And it'll tell me it's already been.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see the message trace on that. So that's something that you should probably open a support ticket and include the message trace, and we can definitely investigate that and see if there's a bug in the system.
I have a second question too.
Okay.
If in that blocked link,
Yep.
Is there a way if for some reason we thought it shouldn't be blocked? Is there a way
A safe list for ATP,
Right,
you mean?
right.
Safe list for ATP,
Safe list for ATP?
for URLs.
Yes, yeah, that's what the top ask that we had so far from our preview tenants as well as from the other presentations, and we will be adding that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
right
you.
now we only have blacklist or the, we only have the allowed list, and that's something that we will add.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
I was looking at the tech note about
Could you speak up, sorry?
I was looking at the tech notes about blocking executables, which will take priority if you activate the advanced feature, if you have that rule in place.
Yeah, right now the way that it's blocked is through the ETR rules. And ETR rules will be running way before ATP. So the rules that you will have for different types, including EXE, will run first. And we will be blocking it before the email comes into ATP.
So it's safe to say that it's to remove those rules out of it, or just keep them in there just in case it runs through?
I mean, if you're relying on ATP to do your zero-day protection, yes, it will do that. But if you absolutely have a policy in your organization saying we don't want our users to get EXEs, and that's not causing problems, there's no reason to remove it.
It's a different scenario, right?
Yeah.
If, as Ori is saying, you don't want any EXE transmitting through the email in and out of your organization, then that will be an ETR role. But if you need that for some business reason, but you want to be protected in case of the EXE is malicious, then ATP is the solution.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, as far as the banned users feature, when a user does get banned, is it a possibility to have a spot in the admin portal where we could get a list of who's banned?
That is an ask we have heard before, and we are actively working on it. So we hear you.
Release time is
and
when?
we don't have a specific time that we can commit to now. But
What was the question?
what's that? So I'll repeat the question. It's essentially getting visibility into actions we've taken on individual mailboxes as far as banning users, giving tools for compromised self-service, compromised recovery, things along those lines. That's something that we are including. We already provide notification, and there's a lot of stuff, but I think what he's asking for is actual visibility. So right now there's a mail sent out, and in the message center doesn't get it, but it's yeah. Yeah. So we can talk in a second, and I can clear it up. Yeah.
But the feature we're adding is this compromised recovery dashboard, so you'll have a much better experience.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But
Excellent.
yeah, we'll definitely announce when it's a little closer to being baked for sure. So
Yeah, so a question is, what type of URL you decide to rewrite? Is it all URL or part of the URLs?
So every URL will be rewritten unless it's in the LOAD list that I just showed you guys.
Okay.
It's href based, so even if it's a subscription, non-subscription, or in a website that's embedded into the email, like daily news notification and all that, that will be all rewritten.
So the URL in your whitelist will not be rewritten then?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question on the click tracking.
oh,
So
didn't see
if
that.
if you're doing redirect to do the safe link feature,
Attachments, yeah.
how are you handling the distribution of something through an ad that is on that page that actually isn't in that page? So, ads rotate. Some of those URLs are bad. Some of them are good in the ads. How are you actually going to figure out what the end recipient web browser is actually ever going to see?
So the URL in the message itself is not going to rotate.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm saying the page that URL just sent you to actually has an ad on it that is rotating that may or may not be delivering you that malware content.
Okay, so I think what he's asking is the reputation of the page itself, the content is changing on that page. How are we evaluating the reputation of the page?
So for that, we already have feeds that we get from third parties on a regular basis. So we have a lookup table, millions of URLs that are being refreshed multiple times a day that we can compare against at the time of click. So that's the purpose of the URL rewrite, right? So it doesn't matter how many URLs in the email. What matters is that what URL the recipient is clicking. And that's what triggers us. That's our input for us. And the detection part is either based on those feeds or the features that we are adding, such as basically URL detonation.
Yep. And it's actually following, so I think just to go deeper into your question, the composition of the page is less important than the reputation of the site itself and us detecting whether, A, yes, that's a continuously bad reputation URL and location, or it's a known compromised location. And we're getting alerted to that either by, as Bulent said, either by third parties or by our own technology to follow through and understand what's the status of this page.
But it's basically 100% reputation.
For
For
the
now,
reputation,
it's 100%
yes.
reputation, correct.
Okay.
And at the time of email delivery, we already have a filter doing that. So the advantage here is that URLs change. They are very agile in terms of getting compromised and getting back to the good state. That's why we are having this at the time of click protection, because that's when you get compromised rather than an email sitting in your inbox.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, and I just had one other thing, and that was with the new sandboxing. Is this actually able to handle the malware that actually is designed to evade those techniques, and so sleep and things like that, so that you're not actually, are you time warping this content so that it actually thinks it's lived a lifespan of a couple of years before it actually ever gets released?
So there are techniques out there that, adversaries know that try to figure out that if they are running it in a sandbox or not. The sandbox or VM, to be accurate, the solution that we have is built on top of the vulnerability detections for Windows operating system versions that we have. So it's built on top of a sandbox technology that Windows team already uses to detect vulnerabilities. And it was enhanced with the other perimeter checks that comes into the picture with the content. So it's very hard to break, but as everything else, they will be finding new ways to detect that they are running in a Microsoft sandbox, and we will be addressing them.
Great, thank you.
Good.
Yeah, so for mail flow rules, there's a character limit within those rules. And I was told by Premier Support that when you have a subdomain, for example, surveymonkey.com,
Sure.
they have like 20 different websites, domain names. And within that they might have secure.surveymonkey.com. So I have to take all of those subdomains and list them in a whitelist to say that they're okay for them to send email in, but it chews up the mail flow rules, the character limits that we're currently restricted to. Is there going to be a change in that?
Yeah, so you won't need to use mail flow rules for that. You can actually use the allow domain feature that we'll have in place, and that's something that's I think it's already in place, or it's rolling out.
It's almost finished.
It's rolling out soon, so that'll actually allow you to do a whitelist by a domain, so you won't have to use an ETR for that, and we've taken into account the potential limitations there.
Okay, and the other question I had is, you promote that we use the junk mail reporting tool for Outlook so that end users are sending their junk mail requests to the EOP. But we never know what happens with that and what applies to our tenant. Is there anything in the future?
Yes. So we have gotten that feedback a lot, and something that we're actually almost ready to release soon, which is submissions report, which is going to both proactively let you know if there are many submissions that are revealing that there's maybe an ETR in place that's causing issues or a configuration that can be improved, as well as something on demand that the admin can run and actually say, what do my submissions look like? Do I have a ton of submissions, a couple, from certain users? So we're definitely looking to make that more transparent.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Can you show where you blocked file types in the admin center?
Where you block file types?
Yeah.
For AV?
I can show it to you after this.
Yeah, it's essentially an ETR that you would create based on file type. It's a transport rule based on...
It's a transport rule.
Based on file type?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
I'll show it to you.
Go ahead.
Okay, a couple questions, and pardon me if this is really easy because
sure.
We don't use Exchange 360 for our mail right now. On the inbound logging, when you have your stack of review on what as mail comes in, at that initial connection point, do you guys log that? Like you've dropped that mail, or do you just
essentially edge protection?
Yeah,
do we log that? Yes, we keep track
So
of
that's
that.
something that as a customer you'd have visibility into to see, and what, I mean, do you just log the IP that a connection was attempted and that it failed?
It's part of the agent logs
Yep.
that we log. The data is available to tenants in aggregated form in the reports. So if you want to see what's blocked at the edge, all the IPs and all that, we're talking about a huge amount of data. So we aggregate
I'm just
them.
saying that the prior product I'm currently using, we have a similar functionality in it, and it's heck when you have to try to figure out why somebody's piece of mail got dropped because all you get is an IP, and you don't necessarily know who that is. So I just was curious how that you guys.
So we
work
have
on that.
message tracing for that. It's basically it gives.
But if it drops at the edge, how much tracing are you going to have?
We're not going to have anything.
We will
exactly.
have the logs. We will have the
There'll be
logs,
an
but
attempt.
it's not available to admins.
Second question on the safe URL
Yes.
rewrite stuff. How does that work on HTTPS?
It works on HTTPS the same way that it works with
But
regular.
Yeah, the URL protection in that, because
As long as it's a URL, it will be rewritten. It will be rerouted to us. We will look it up. If it is clean, you will go back to the original
Okay,
HTTPS.
so you're just going to grab whatever that URL is from
Yeah,
that particular
correct.
thing, and whether HTTP or HTTPS, you're going to kick it on through. Okay, thanks.
Got it. Good.
For the SPF verification on inbound mail, is that just a hard block, or is it quarantine? Is it configurable?
So there's a couple. Yeah, there's a couple options, right? So if you're doing it via the advanced spam filter rules, that's a one or nothing. That's literally you're either saying hard fail, reject the message, or you're saying don't take that kind of action. Additionally, though, you can use the SPF header that we stamp that says SPF fail or pass as part of a rule to say, I want to take a different action, like I want to quarantine it, I want to mark it as spam, low confidence, high confidence, whatever you want. So you have that level of customization by using the header that we provide you.
So I could do something like temporarily allow or temporarily bypass SPF verification for a particular domain?
Yes, with the rule.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a very frequent request for us.
Yep. That's with an ETR, yes. The ETRs are going to take precedence. So.
For the advanced threat protection stuff, how does that work for like the files, like in a zip file, 7-zip, zip, or anything like that?
It will work with the container file types like zip, rar, or any other container file, as long as it's not password protected. So we will open up the container, break it down to basic file types that I just mentioned, and we will be sandboxing those files.